All right, let's get into this. We've got what looks like a classic neighborhood feud. Two farmers, two water pumps. But, what starts as a simple argument is actually a super interesting physics problem. We're talking about invisible forces that are messing with the power grid. So meet Ramu. This guy is completely fed up. He's tried everything, even getting up at the crack of dawn to beat his neighbor Bhima to the punch. But it doesn't matter. If Bhima's motor is already running, Ramu's just won't start. It's totally dead in the water. So what is happening here? I mean, they're both hooked up to the same long power line that runs out to their fields. And you'd think, okay, one guy's just using too much power, right? But nope, the real reason is way more interesting. And yeah, a little bit more technical.
Naturally, Ramu does what pretty much any of us would do. He goes for the simplest explanation. He's thinking, Bhima's motor is just a monster. It's sucking the power line dry. So he calls up his mechanic buddy Hari and basically says, you gotta fix this. I need my motor to work. I don't care what Bhima's doing.
But Hari, the mechanic, shows up and pretty much dismisses that idea right away. He tells Ramu, look, it's not just about how much power is being used. The real bad guy here is something totally different. It's something called a voltage drop, and it's happening all along that big, long wire.
So Hari's diagnosis is a massive voltage drop. Now, the easiest way to think about voltage is like electrical pressure, kind of like water pressure in a pipe. Bhima's motor is pulling a huge amount of current, which is like opening a giant tap. By the time that electricity gets all the way down the line to Ramu's farm, the pressure is just gone. It's so low that Ramu's motor is literally being starved of the energy it needs just to kick on.
Okay, so what's causing this crazy high current draw in the first place? This is where Hari drops the real bombshell. He points to the true villain of this whole story, and it's a technical term you might not have come across before, a low power factor.
So to really get what a low power factor means, we have to look at what motors, like Bishamaz, are actually asking for from the power grid. And it's pretty interesting. They're not just asking for one kind of power. They're asking for two completely different types all at once.
Okay, so this is the key. You've got active power on one hand. This is the good stuff, the working power that actually does the job, pumping the water. But then you have this other thing called reactive power. This stuff doesn't do any of the physical work. Its only job is to build up the magnetic fields inside the motor. It's like the setup crew for a concert. They're essential to get the show running, but they're not the ones playing the music.
And you see active power everywhere, right? It's the light coming from a bulb, the hot water from your geyser, the wind from a fan. It's the power that gives you a result you can actually see and feel. It gets a real job done.
But what about that reactive power? Well, here's the weird part. It doesn't actually get used up to do any work. It just bounces back and forth between the power company and the motor. It's literally like a ping-pong ball of energy. And this constant, useless game of ping-pong is what pulls a massive amount of extra current through the wires, clogging everything up without pumping even one drop of water.
And that right there brings us to the heart of the problem. Power factor is just a fancy term for electrical efficiency. It's a number that tells you how much of the power being pulled is actually doing useful work. Since Bhima's motor has a low power factor, it means it's playing way too much of that energy ping-pong. That forces it to draw a ton of extra, useless current from the power line, and that is exactly what's causing the voltage to crash.
Okay, so now that we know the problem, let's talk about the solution. How does Hari plan to fix this invisible energy traffic jam? Well, it turns out the fix is surprisingly simple, almost elegant for such a tricky problem.
So, yeah, this is the big question, right? For Ramu, for Bhima, how in the world do you stop that game of energy ping-pong that's clogging up the main power line and get the voltage back where it needs to be?
And this is where Hari pulls out the hero of our story. It's a simple little electrical part called a capacitor. And this one small device is about to completely change the game for both farmers. So how does this little thing work its magic? Well, first, you install it right there next to Bhima's motor. Now think of this capacitor as a tiny rechargeable battery, but it's only for that reactive ping-pong power. It supplies that energy directly to the motor, so they can play their little game of ping-pong locally, right there at the farm. And because the motor isn't pulling that reactive power all the way from the grid anymore, the total current on the main power line drops way down. And when the current drops, that nasty voltage drop disappears, the voltage goes back to normal, and boom, Ramu's motor fires right up.
And just like that, with the capacitor hooked up, Ramu's motor roars to life. Problem solved. Bhima is actually so impressed, he agrees to split the cost of the capacitor with Ramu. The feud is officially over. I mean, the difference is just night and day. Before, you had this massive current draw causing a huge voltage drop, and Ramu's motor was useless. But after, the current on the main line is way lower, the voltage is stable, and now both farmers can run their pumps whenever they want, no problem. But just when you think the story is over, Bhima remembers something else that Hari mentioned. The mechanic told him that fixing this power factor thing wouldn't just solve Rama's problem, it would actually make his own motor last longer. And Bhima's kind of confused. Like, how is that possible? Which, is a really good question.
And that really is the final and maybe the most important piece of the puzzle. See, improving your power factor doesn't just help out your neighbors or the power company. It directly helps you. Remember all that extra useless current Bhima's motor was pulling? Well, all that current creates waste heat. And heat is the #1 enemy of any electrical motor. By adding the capacitor, the motor doesn't have to work as hard pulling all that extra current, so it runs a lot cooler and way more efficiently. A cooler, more efficient motor is a motor that's going to have a much, much longer life. It's a simple fix, but it's a win for absolutely everyone.